One rainy night, I sat alone in the garage, thinking about how unstable my family life had become recently. My wife, Jody, no longer cared about our children and home like before. Instead, she spent more time on her career and appearance. I started suspecting that Jody was having an extramarital affair with someone. One day, I accidentally discovered Jody was with an unknown man at a hotel. I decided to tail her and found out the man's name was Felix Brooks, who was a manager at the company Jody worked at. From then on, I was determined to find evidence of my wife's infidelity. Deep down, I still loved Jody, but could not tolerate her betrayal. I was resolute to end this shattered marriage by any means, despite having to go through immense mental anguish. The story of my struggle is about to unfold. I come from rural roots, a true country boy at heart. After finishing junior college, I married my high school sweetheart, Jody. However, Jody always yearned for the glitz and glamour of high society. She immersed herself in society pages, subscribed to glossy magazines about the elite, and even read car magazines at the dentist's office to learn about luxury cars. She had a keen eye for designers and fashion lines, dreaming of a life beyond our means. To fulfill her desires, I took a job at a fancy feed store in Omaha, catering to yuppie clients. This decision brought us closer to urban conveniences and allowed me to pursue my passion. I excelled in my role, providing top-notch service to customers and enjoying flexible working hours. As a result. Version 1. Initially satisfied with city life, Jody eventually found a job herself, leading to daycare for our kids. Despite this change, they adapted well to their new routine. Jody landed a position at a medical device company, loving the office atmosphere that let her dress up and interact with non-farming folks. As she delved deeper into her career, her focus shifted away from our family life. I ended up taking on most of the childcare duties, from drop-offs and pickups to cooking and cleaning. While she meticulously cared for her wardrobe and appearance, we diligently saved money each month with the dream of buying our own feed store. However, despite our dual incomes, our savings dwindled. Daycare costs were part of the problem, but most of the money disappeared on BV treatments, salon trips, and designer clothes. I struggled to understand how our financial situation had worsened despite making more money. My attempts to broach this matter with Jody were met with defensiveness and hostility, which led me to establish a separate savings account to protect our future aspirations. She started working extra hours, engaging in secretive phone conversations, and showing less interest in our intimate moments. Her desire for a flashy new car and discussions about cosmetic surgery hinted at a longing for something beyond our marriage. It became clear to me that she was involved in an extramarital affair. Despite being considered a simple man from the countryside, I was not naive. At this point, my priority was not to salvage the marriage. I simply wanted to confront the situation and move forward before it escalated any further. It was challenging to pinpoint the exact details since I was not familiar with her colleagues, but my instincts told me that the affair, if any, was likely with someone from her workplace. Fortunately, I had the privilege of working alongside a couple of dependable individuals. Although they lacked formal education, their work ethic was commendable. Despite my managerial position, I never abused my authority. The workflow ran smoothly as everyone understood their responsibilities and collaborated seamlessly. This approach fostered a strong bond, and Chad and Daniel would prove to be invaluable allies in my pursuit. I couldn't ignore the recurring pattern. Every Wednesday, Jody would dress impeccably, putting extra effort into her appearance for work. Sensing an opportunity, I sought assistance from my colleagues, who graciously offered to cover my duties on those days. Parking near the entrance of the Russell Medical Plant, I utilized the time to catch up on technical reading while remaining vigilant. Around 11 a.m., my suspicions were confirmed when Jody emerged from the building and made her way to her car. Following her discreetly was not a challenge, and within minutes, she parked at the Holiday Inn, selecting a secluded spot away from prying eyes. Shortly after, an unfamiliar individual arrived in a crimson Lexus and parked at the opposite side of the parking lot. Both of them proceeded towards room 125 and vanished inside, causing my heart to sink and confirming my worst fears. A mixture of disappointment and uneasiness washed over me, and I realized that I needed to devise a plan. Upon returning to work, I made a firm decision to take my time strategizing my next course of action. However, before leaving the parking lot, a surge of frustration compelled me to sabotage her vehicle by cutting two of her valve stems with my baling wire cutters. In retrospect, I should have considered targeting his car as well, but in that moment, anger clouded my judgment. The rest of the day dragged on at an excruciatingly slow pace. After work, I picked up the children, prepared dinner, and anxiously awaited her return home. Finally, when she did arrive, I casually asked about her day, to which she mentioned having a flat tire. Apparently, one of her colleagues had kindly assisted her in changing it. We left the matter at that without delving into further discussion. The next morning, after dropping off the boys at daycare, I made a detour to the plant. It didn't take me long to spot the red Lexus conveniently parked in a reserved spot, displaying a sign with the name Felix Brooks, Distribution Manager. I took note of this information through Chad's wife, who happened to work in the personnel department at Russell. Swiftly, I gathered intelligence on Felix. It turned out that he was already married and had a history of misconduct, including inappropriate behavior towards a coworker and discrepancies in his expense reports. Armed with his personal details, ranging from his address to his social security number, I couldn't yet comprehend what I would do with this information. By evening, Chad, Daniel, and I had completed a productive day's work, allowing us to unwind with a beer before I had to pick up the children. While I attempted to maintain a composed and rational outlook, beneath the surface, my anger simmered, intensified by moments of silent tears. I felt shattered, incapable of repairing the damage caused by Jody's betrayal. Enduring her presence became increasingly unbearable. I yearned for closure, for an end to the torment. The next day brought another stroke of luck when I remembered that one of my esteemed clients, Batty Russell, happened to be the wife of the president of Russell Medical Company. Although I hadn't met him, Batty and I had a great rapport. I made a conscious effort to be exceptionally polite with Batty, contemplating whether I could utilize our relationship to my advantage when her daughter Karen approached us. Karen, who was in her final year of veterinary school, joined our conversation as Batty went to the barn for some chores. We ended up chatting for about an hour, and I found myself enjoying her company, albeit with a hint of guilt. A quickly dissipated after-to-right left. Over the weekend, I spent some time in the garage working on a project. Using my welding skills, I created a small piece of flat steel and attached 4 sharp points to it. Made from concrete nails for maximum hardness, the resulting plate, measuring approximately 6 by 6 inches, would serve as my initial tool for seeking revenge through harassment. I encountered Batty again on Tuesday, feeling somewhat downcast as I unloaded the order, my usual cheerful demeanor conspicuously absent. She noticed my subdued mood, piquing her curiosity. "Bob, what's on your mind today?" "You seem a bit down," Batty inquired, her concern evident in her voice. "I have some personal issues." "I apologize, but I'm not the best company today," I responded, my mood dampened by the weight of my troubles. "Let's grab some coffee and you can talk to me about it," she suggested, leading the way back to her impeccably designed kitchen, reminiscent of a magazine spread with its stainless steel and elegant accents. I couldn't help but think how much Jody would have adored it sitting at the table. Batty placed the coffee down and leaned in, encouraging me to open up. "Well, how can you help me, Batty?" I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to burden her with my problems. "I won't be able to understand the situation unless you provide me with the details," she assured me. Reluctantly, I began to share my concerns. My wife Jody works at Russell Medical, and I suspect she's being pressured into a relationship with one of her superiors. But I can't prove anything. "Why do you think this is happening?" Betty inquired, her brow furrowing in concern. "It's mostly little things, but last week I caught them together at the Holiday Inn. Jody doesn't know. I know. And I'm at a loss for how to approach the subject. I don't know if she's being coerced or if it's something she wants. Our family life has suffered. She seems indifferent towards the children and me. The secrecy is what truly bothers me." I confessed the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. "Who is this man?" Betty asked, her tone firm. "I believe his name is Felix Brooks. I'm not sure if Jody works directly under him or in a different department. I've never met him." Would you like me to look into it? Batty offered, her voice filled with determination. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. If you think there's a discreet way to handle it, I'd appreciate your help. I don't want to cause a scene. All right, let me see what I can do. I'll bring those oats next Thursday. Batty promised, her resolve evident. Grateful for her assistance, I thanked her before preparing to leave. Where's Karen? I inquired as an afterthought. She's away at school, but she'll be home this weekend. Why don't you bring the boys up so she can meet them? Batty suggested with a smile. As I left, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Perhaps things would turn out better than I dared to hope. Perhaps this weekend would mark the beginning of a brighter chapter for me and the boys. The following morning, as rain poured down relentlessly, Jody meticulously prepared for her routine yet seemingly significant day. I observed silently, holding back any remarks as I dropped the kids off at the daycare center before heading to work. My colleagues had everything arranged to cover my morning shifts. Chad would use my truck for deliveries and log entries, with me initialing upon my return. Meanwhile, Daniel arrived with his cousin's van, equipped with a Ford Jack loaded with our modified steel plate. After ensuring all arrangements were in place, they set off for their tasks, leaving me to head to the Holiday Inn. True to form, Jody arrived promptly and parked in her usual spot, followed closely by Felix. Once they disappeared into the room, I allowed them a moment to settle in. Despite the rain, I swiftly retrieved the Jack from the van and maneuvered it towards Felix's car. With practiced efficiency, I positioned the Jack under his engine block and raised it, piercing the oil pan with a satisfying pop. Moving to the rear of the Lexus, I repeated the process, puncturing the fuel tank. Oil and gasoline spilled out as I returned the Jack to the van. The entire operation was completed in under a minute. Next, I made my way to Joey's car, cutting slices into 2 valve stems as before. Satisfied with my actions, I prepared to depart. Driving past Felix's now compromised vehicle, I casually flicked a lit cigarette out the window before speeding away. In my rearview mirror, I saw flames erupting from the car, followed by the sound of an explosion. Despite the chaos, a sense of relief washed over me. Joni arrived home from work later than usual, skipping dinner and heading straight to bed. I spent quality time with the boys, helping them with their evening routine before tucking them in. That night, I opted to sleep on the couch. The next morning, as I got the boys ready for daycare and we went about our morning routine, Jody remained in bed, showing no signs of getting up or engaging in conversation. Her absence at the breakfast table went unaddressed. And as we left for the day, I noted her car was conspicuously absent from the driveway. Around 9 a.m., right after we finished loading up the trucks, Lieutenant Jack Clark paid me a visit. Despite his friendly demeanor, his unexpected appearance caught my attention. He asked me about my schedule from the previous day, curious to know what I had been up to. I replied that it was a typical day with regular deliveries, nothing out of the ordinary. I couldn't help but wonder why he was asking. Confused by his line of questioning, Clark wanted to know where I was around noon. This prompted me to retrieve the delivery logs from the previous day. I laid them out before him, going through each stop and the corresponding time, as well as my initials. A faint smirk appeared on his face. He commented on the meticulousness of my log and asked if I maintained this level of detail every day, with a hint of amusement in his tone. I offered to let him review the logs for the past month, unsure of where this conversation was heading. However, he declined, his smile lingering as he finally revealed the reason for his visit. Clark explained that there was a vehicle damaged at the Holiday Inn in East Oman the day before, and they were trying to find out if anyone had any knowledge of the incident. I questioned why he approached me, sensing a connection to Joey's absence. He then revealed that another vehicle parked nearby had 2 valve stems cut, coincidentally belonging to my wife's car. They were exploring if there was any correlation. His explanation shed some light on the situation, leaving me with a mix of concern and uncertainty about Jody's involvement in the incident. I expressed my confusion about why my wife's car was at the Holiday Inn parking lot in the first place, and how it was related to the damaged car. Lieutenant Clark clarified that the damaged vehicle belonged to a colleague my wife had a lunch meeting with. They were meeting some company clients at the hotel, and the incident occurred during their lunch. I asked if he had spoken to the people they dined with, hoping to gain some clarity. Unfortunately, they couldn't remember their names, Clark replied. "Are we going to have an open conversation, or are we going to avoid the issue?" I asked, wanting to be direct. He leaned back in his chair, a slight smile on his face. "Do you happen to know a man named Felix Brooks?" "I've never met him before, I can assure you of that," I responded honestly. "I believe you." Clark nodded. "I prefer not to get involved in personal matters, and I hope I won't have to come back. Here's my card. If anything else comes up, feel free to give me a call." All right, we shook hands and he apologized. "I'm sorry for bringing this to your attention. If there's anything I can do to help, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you." "But you didn't really give me any new information," I noted as he walked away. "Put the pieces together." Later that day, when he returned home from work with the kids, he called back over his shoulder. I noticed Jody's car in the driveway. She seemed casually dressed and had dinner ready. She mentioned feeling unwell and calling in sick, but didn't mention anything about the previous day's events. I decided not to bring up the subject either, as she went to bed early. Once again, I took care of the boys before settling on the couch for the night. The next day, as I took the boys to daycare, Jody was already busy getting ready for work. After dropping off the boys, I made a stop at the doctor's office to request an STD check. The rest of the day went on as usual for a Friday. When I returned home, Jody was there again. During dinner, I casually mentioned my plan to take the boys to one of my customers' farms the next day. While I invited Jody, I knew she would decline. As expected, she mentioned some shopping she had in mind, and I didn't push the matter further. Whether it was shopping or something else, the outcome remained the same. Spending Saturday at the Russells' ranch with Karen and the boys was truly delightful. Laughter, joy, and Beatty's delicious lunch made the day special. Karen bonded effortlessly with the boys, and they reciprocated her affection wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, Mr. Russell's absence meant I still hadn't met him. Batty made no mention of our previous conversation, and Karen seemed unaware of any underlying tension. It was difficult to say goodbye and return home, but all good things must come to an end. Upon returning home, Jody showed no interest in our day's adventures. Her indifference was evident as the boys tried to share their excitement with her, only to be met with disinterest. Eventually, they stopped trying. She did ask about my sleeping arrangements, noticing my absence from the bed. I gave a vague excuse about work-related sleep troubles, which seemed to satisfy her curiosity. And with that, the matter was put to rest, never to be brought up again. The following week passed without any notable events. On her birthday, I noticed she hadn't made any special plans, leading me to believe our scheduled meeting for the day had been canceled. This suited me fine, as I had work to catch up on. I took the chance to visit a divorce attorney recommended to me, who provided informative handouts, brochures, and intriguing fill-in-the-blank forms. Everything went back to normal until the next Wednesday. On that day, she followed her usual morning routine, meticulously styled her hair, dressed in new black lingerie, applied a fresh fragrance, and even seemed to be wearing new shoes. Without showing my curiosity, I quickly left with the boys for a planned outing. After dropping them off, I discreetly passed by the workplace and noticed a shiny new Mercedes SL in his parking spot. I hastily jotted down the license plate number before quickly returning to my duties. The enthusiasm among my colleagues mirrored my own. We efficiently completed the morning deliveries and manipulated the records once again, even though we suspected that Jack Clark could see through our deception. Nevertheless, we persisted. During our extended and leisurely lunch break, Chad continued with the deliveries while Daniel obtained 2 large bottles of hydrochloric acid from the pool supply store. Meanwhile, I chose to spend my lunch break with Jack Clark. As I entered his office with pulled pork sandwiches, fries, and a couple of Cokes, I could see the confusion in his eyes. I greeted him cheerfully and settled into the seat across from him. His knowing smile suggested that he sensed something was amiss. I casually suggested that we have lunch together and catch up on the latest developments in the car damage case, realizing that I needed to keep him occupied for a couple of hours. It was going to be a lengthy meal indeed. While I engaged in casual conversation with Jack, Daniel was carrying out his part of the plan in the hotel parking lot. He meticulously applied acid to the Mercedes, targeting the trunk, fenders, deck, convertible top, leather seats, floor mats, and even the dashboard. To ensure further damage, he added mothballs to the gas tank, knowing the havoc it would wreak on the engine if ignited. Any remaining acid was carefully spread across the tires. Before leaving, he discreetly tampered with the valve stems on Jody's car, completing the task in just 15 minutes. Despite our prolonged conversation, Jack eventually voiced his suspicion. "What the hell are you up to?" he asked. I calmly replied, "I just wanted to make sure I had a solid alibi in case anything happened to Felix Portz's car today." Jack inquired about the significance of today, to which I smirked and said, "The pulled pork sandwich was on special." With a swift motion, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the daycare center. "Hi, Jessica. It's Bob Bryant. I'll be stuck at work this afternoon. Could you please contact Jody and request that she pick up the boys? Thank you very much. You can reach her at extension 125 by dialing 8744329. It is important to reach her as soon as possible. Okay. Thank you once again." Jack, reclined in his chair, chuckled to himself as he savored the flavor of the pork sandwiches. The room fell silent briefly before Jack spoke up again. "Do you think I should call Mr. Brooks and inquire about his car? Why would you want to do that?" I asked. "Do you happen to have his contact information on hand?" Jack insisted. I provided him with both Mr. Brooks's cell number and the number for a room at the Holiday Inn, specifically room 125. Take your pick. Jack activated the speakerphone and dialed the hotel number. After a few rings, Felix Brooks answered, sounding out of breath. "Hello, who is this, Mr. Brooks?" "This is Detective Clark. I wanted to inform you that we are still investigating the vandalism to your car," Jack stated calmly. Mr. Brooks sounded startled. "Why are you calling here? How did you get this number?" "I am a police officer." "Mr. Brooks, have you acquired a new car yet?" Jack inquired. "Yes, I have." "Why do you ask?" Mr. Brooks replied, sounding cautious. "Just making sure we do not encounter a repeat of the last incident." "Is the car with you now?" Jack asked. "Yes, it is parked in a lot," Mr. Brooks confirmed. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Let me check," Jack responded. We listened as Felix muttered in the background, presumably looking out the window at the parking lot. There were a few unclear noises followed by a low groan. He returned to the phone. "Something seems off. I will have to get dressed and go check. I will call you back." "Fair enough." "But Mr. Brooks, why are you not dressed already?" I inquired. "None of your damn business. I have to go," he snapped before abruptly hanging up. Jack looked at me with a satisfied grin. "Are you happy?" "Absolutely. Anyway, I have to get back to work. If you need anything, give me a call." "All right, maybe we can have lunch again next week." "I hope not. This needs to end soon before someone gets hurt," Jack remarked solemnly. I returned to my duties. Chad had meticulously organized the logs, while Daniel discreetly disposed of the acid bottles in a hidden location. The evening at home held the promise of excitement. Jody had picked up the boys, but retired to bed early without uttering a word. The next day, Jack came to visit me. He provided a detailed account of the car damage, explaining that Felix's insurance claim was still pending. Due to the previous incident in Texas, the vehicle was considered a total loss, leaving Felix with a loss of over $60,000. Despite Jack's assurance of my innocence, Felix remained convinced of my involvement. While Jack may have suspected my role, he had no concrete evidence, and perhaps deep down he didn't want to find any. As for Joey's tires, I never inquired, and no one offered any information. Since Jody had remained silent about the entire ordeal, I decided it was time to put an end to it. The results of my SDD test came back negative, reassuring me that I had already completed the necessary paperwork for the lawyer to initiate the divorce proceedings. I planned to take the boys to the Russells' ranch over the weekend, just in case Karen happened to be there. If not, we would spend the day with Batty. The only unresolved matter was the lack of concrete evidence regarding the extramarital affair. The weekend turned out to be wonderful. Karen was present, much to the delight of the children, and we all had a great time. It felt like we were a family again, a feeling that I deeply missed, as did the boys. Karen remained unaware of the brewing turmoil, thankfully refraining from prying. Before saying goodbye, Batty gave me a reassuring wink and assured me that everything would work out. I received an enticing job offer about 100 miles away. It provided better pay, a higher position, and the potential for future business ownership. It seemed like the perfect opportunity, except for the fact that it would take us away from Karen. The following Wednesday, Jody went through her routine of dressing up once again. I was uncertain about the type of car her boyfriend was using, but it was clear she was getting ready for another meeting with him. I assumed they were still going to the same place. I knew I needed to take action, but I hadn't come up with a plan yet. As we contemplated our next steps, Batty Russell suddenly arrived. She signaled for me to join her in the car and silently drove us to the plant. Parking at the back, we entered through a private entrance directly into Mr. Russell's office. Batty made introductions and his secretary promptly served us coffee. We engaged in casual conversation until my curiosity got the best of me. "Is there a specific reason you brought me here?" I finally inquired. Mr. Russell chuckled. "It's time to finalize this deal. Batty has briefed me on the situation and we've done some internal investigation. Once everything is ready, we'll move forward. You'll have all the necessary information by the end of the day. If I do anything that causes you embarrassment, Bob, I apologize in advance. It's not my intention to harm you in any way." We continued chatting, and I couldn't help but notice Batty's nervousness when the conversation turned to Karen. Despite my efforts to be discreet, I clearly failed. The ringing phone grabbed everyone's attention. Mr. Russell's demeanor changed as he answered the call. "What's going on? All right, thank you for the update. You know what to do next, correct?" Mr. Russell's smile returned. "Everything is ready. We can proceed. Felix and your wife are in their usual room at the Holiday Inn. Felix was driving a company BMW, which goes against company policy. Therefore, it has been returned to the plant. Unfortunately, it appears that your wife also has a couple of flat tires. It seems to be becoming a bit of a tradition." He put the call on speakerphone and dialed the room. "Felix, this is Mr. Russell. I apologize for the interruption, but we need to discuss an important matter." Felix's response was hesitant, filled with stuttering. "Yes, okay, no problem. How did you obtain this number? That's not important, Felix. What matters is that the legal department has been informed about a potential sexual harassment situation. I require accurate responses from you." "Is there a female employee from the company with you in the room?" Mr. Russell asked. There was a brief silence, followed by muffled background conversation. "Yes, there is, sir," Felix responded. "Is she there willingly, or is there any coercion or threat involved?" Mr. Russell inquired further. "No, sir, absolutely not. There has been no coercion. She is here of her own accord. I did not force her to do anything," Felix clarified. "Thank you for your honesty on this sensitive issue, Felix. We will prepare a statement to confirm this. Now I need to speak with the young lady to verify." "Could you please put her on the line?" Mr. Russell requested, and after some murmurs in the background, Jody came on the line. "Sir, how can I help you?" she asked. "Did Mr. Brooks coerce or threaten you in any way to accompany him?" Mr. Russell questioned. "No, sir, he did not threaten me at all," Jody replied. "Good to know. So it was consensual and there was no intimidation, correct?" Mr. Russell sought confirmation. After a brief pause and some discussions, Jody returned to the line. "Yes, sir, it was consensual." "Excellent. When you and Felix return to the plant, we will have the statements ready for you to sign. Can you put Felix back on, please?" Mr. Russell requested. "Sir, how did you know my name?" Jody asked. "Do not worry about that, Jody. It is not relevant," Mr. Russell assured her. Once Felix was back on the call, Mr. Russell instructed him to go back to the plant to sign the necessary documents in the legal department. After ending the call, Mr. Russell smiled. "Felix, why don't you take Bob out for lunch and return in a couple of hours? By then, the legal team should be done, and we can all go back to our regular routines." During our delightful lunch, Mr. Russell suggested that I contain my gratitude. Batty insisted on refraining from discussing the matter further and made me promise not to divulge anything to Karen. It was a promising sign. I shared my excitement about the new job offer with Batty, who expressed her happiness for both the boys and me. After lunch, we returned to the plant where I obtained notarized copies of Felix and Jody's statements, affirming that their affair was consensual. The legal team assured me that this evidence would be sufficient for my lawyer to proceed with the divorce. Felix and Jody were promptly terminated, their personal belongings packed, and they were escorted off the premises. Unfortunately, neither of them had transportation available. Batty kindly lent me her car, assuring me I could return it the following day. With the papers in hand, I visited the lawyer's office. Batty made multiple copies of each document. One set was designated to be sent to Felix's wife at the bank. I closed our accounts and settled all outstanding credit card balances, promptly canceling them. Next, I contacted the gas, water, electric, and phone companies to arrange for utility disconnection. By Friday afternoon, I cheekily informed Jack Clark of my virtuous behavior during a visit, which elicited laughter from him. I informed the landlord of my impending departure and bid farewell to my colleagues at work, receiving well wishes tinged with regret. Daniel accompanied me to the Russell Ranch with my truck, facilitating the return of Beatty's car as I prepared to pick up the boys and head home. A sense of apprehension crept over me upon arrival, as Jody's absence from the driveway caught my attention. Inside, she sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face, a stark departure from her usual stoicism. 2 boxes of her personal belongings from work lay nearby. After attending to the boys, I stood beside her, silently offering her the opportunity to express herself. "You just had to do it, didn't you?" "Had to disrupt everything in my life," she uttered between sobs. "Why couldn't you just mind your own business? You had no right to interfere in mine." I was surprised by her self-centered perspective, still seeing the situation as if it solely revolved around her. She displayed no consideration for our children or me, not to mention Felix's wife, Amelia. Our family, our life, and our plans held no significance to her. Her sole focus remained on her own actions, indifferent to everything else. Yet strangely, I felt a sense of relief, knowing that I wouldn't be tethered to her for the rest of my life without a word. I retreated to the shower. Later, as I prepared the boys for bed, she withdrew to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. The next day, I brought the boys to work with me, ensuring that everything was in order and that Chad and Daniel could manage the system I'd implemented. We gathered boxes from various stores in preparation for the move. Passing by the Holiday Inn, I noticed Jody's absence, assuming her car had been repaired by now. Repairing the flat tires must have severely depleted her shopping budget for the past month. Upon our return home, Jody was nowhere to be found. We only packed clothes and toys, leaving the rest for Jody to handle. Little did she know, by the next day, all the utilities would be shut off. Filled with anger, I took the boys out, leaving Jody watching silently as we drove away. We spent the night at a motel, seeking refuge from the turmoil. The next morning, I dropped the boys off at daycare, leaving Jessica some cookies and party favors as a token of appreciation. It was the boys' last day, and I wanted them to enjoy it with their friends. Before leaving, Jessica pulled me aside. "What happened with your wife last week? I didn't want to cry, but now that you're leaving." "Undying to know?" Jessica inquired. "She was really upset when I called. She insisted on knowing where I got that number. When I mentioned you gave it to me, she started swearing up a storm. She didn't say much when she picked up the boys, but I could tell she was upset." "I'm sorry, Jessica, I kind of set you up. I admitted that Jody was having an affair. She was at the Holiday Inn with her boyfriend, and I thought if I got you to call and interrupt their party, she might reconsider the whole thing. But it didn't work out like I hoped. Instead, she ended up getting mad at both of us. I'm serving her with divorce papers this afternoon, and the boys and I are leaving for a new job right after I pick them up. It was a low move on my part, and I apologize for dragging you into it. I visited my divorce lawyer, finding everything neatly prepared. Custody of the kids was granted to me, with Jody having visitation rights at her discretion. Frankly, I didn't anticipate her taking much interest in them anyway. As for the rest, our assets were divided evenly, although there wasn't much to divide. There was no spousal support, child maintenance, or financial settlements of any sort. I relinquished all the furniture, appliances, and household items to her. I had no desire for them. She kept her car, which I gladly relinquished, as it had become notorious for its recurrent flat tires. Handing over the papers to Jody seemed like the final formality. Unless she contested it, the divorce would be finalized within 3 months. Attached to the divorce paperwork was a notarized statement from Felix and Jody, with a marginal note from the lawyer indicating that these statements would remain confidential if all terms of the divorce were accepted. No further inquiries were made. As I pulled up to the driveway, seeing her car there assured me she was home. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, grappling with a surge of conflicting emotions. I had loved Jody deeply. She was the only woman I had ever been truly close to. I used to believe our connection was ordinary, oblivious to any discontent on her part. Although her actions were deceptive, I couldn't escape the realization that my lack of attentiveness played a role in this situation. The act of knocking on the door of my own home felt strangely surreal. When she opened it, weariness etched across her face. Her offer of a drink seemed to underscore the growing distance between us. Handing her the papers, I watched as she held them in her hands, her gaze alternating between the documents and me. Curiosity prompted me to ask why, yet I couldn't decipher whether her expression conveyed anger or sadness. After a momentary pause, she finally opened up, her tone tinged with a mixture of resentment and regret. He exuded the scent of aftershave while you carried the fragrance of fertilizer. Adorned in numerous suits, he contrasted with your preference for jeans. Indulging in lobster and steaks, he stood in stark contrast to your love for ribs and burgers. Clad in a London fog overcoat, he differed from your Carhartt jacket, driving a fancy car in contrast to your reliable truck. His manicured nails juxtaposed your perpetually dirty ones. With a prestigious career, he stood as a sharp contrast to your identity as a farm boy. "Must I continue?" she countered. "I yearn for a life that you couldn't provide. Bob, I regret our marriage. I entered it for all the wrong reasons, viewing you as an escape from my parents' failings without looking beyond the immediate. It was foolish to expect you to fulfill my desires. While I love my children, I regret having them. It may sound terrible, but I lack maternal instinct. I hoped that finding someone to fulfill my dreams would bring contentment. Yet it only deepened my dissatisfaction. I misled you. I failed as a mother. But I'm not sorry for pursuing my aspirations and seeking something better. What about his wife? What about your husband? What about your children? What about your family?" I interjected. Her demeanor shifted abruptly. My question seemed to provoke anger, and any semblance of remorse vanished from her expression. "I couldn't care less about any of that. It's my turn now. I yearn to embrace the life of my dreams, a life that doesn't quite align with the conventional image of a husband from a farm and 2 rambunctious kids. I've meticulously sorted through the paperwork, so I implore you to graciously step aside and permit me to forge ahead with my aspirations," she expressed with a touch of bitterness. Her words crystallized my resolve, rendering my decision clear-cut. Without uttering another word, I gracefully pivoted and exited. When I collected my children, Jessica kindly extended her support, offering to make additional phone calls if necessary. Later on, I proactively reached out to utility companies, negotiating to postpone disconnections until month-end. Despite the complexities, a twinge of sympathy lingered within me for her. 3 months down the road, the divorce proceedings concluded seamlessly, devoid of any complications, with Jody remaining silent throughout. As per the lawyer's updates, everything proceeded according to plan. While my new job proved fulfilling, the missed opportunity to acquire the business and a prime quarter section of land was a setback. My boss disclosed that it had been snagged by someone else who intended to transform it into a horse breeding farm. Though my employment remained secure, my aspirations of owning a place of my own faced a temporary setback. Construction commenced near the feed store, sparking speculation among us about its purpose. Upon inquiry, we discovered it was a veterinary clinic specializing in large animals. Initially dismissing it as wishful thinking, my interest was piqued. Miraculously, the entire building materialized in less than 60 days. The new owner was set to make an appearance on Saturday, prompting a lunchtime visit with my boys. Filled with curiosity, their excited shouts of "Karen, Karen" revealed the radiant figure of Karen, accompanied by Batty. Having pursued her veterinary degree, Karen now aspired to raise show horses while overseeing the large animal clinic. As she guided the boys through the facility, Batty and I caught up. Our lunch outing together became an opportunity for Karen to share her plans of building a new home on the property to be closer to her work. The journey home that evening brimmed with contagious joy, evident in the radiant smiles that adorned our faces year after year. Fast forward 5 years, and Karen's fervor for nurturing magnificent horses had evolved into a flourishing enterprise. Her clinic had earned a stellar reputation for its outstanding success. In the same time span, my entrepreneurial pursuits had expanded, proudly boasting 6 thriving feed stores. Our family had welcomed two adorable baby sisters for the boys, becoming the cherished center of attention every weekend. Without fail, my mother-in-law Batty and Mr. Russell, whose first name remained a mystery to me, paid regular visits. Regrettably, Jody never took the initiative to connect with the boys. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this video. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.